Hi, I'm Ven. Welcome to my book corner. Today we're talking about Chrysalis and Requiem, which released on March the 16th of 2024 and came in at 310 pages long. This is a book that I bought purely based on the cover. I think the cover art is amazing, although obviously it is mildly censored for the video because I don't want YouTube to ban me. As always, we shall talk about the story, the characters, the world building, and the presentation before I give my final thoughts at the end of the video, so let's just jump in. So the idea behind this one is actually really interesting. This is a sapphic romance, dark academia story with a thriller slash mystery element. And we are following the character of Veaer, who is a student at a school. There's a few things that I'm not 100% sure about what this school is. I presume it has magical classes as well as standard classes. And it very much gives a boarding school vibe. However, during their time at this school, they've already seen one of their close friends die quite early on in their school life here. And quite early on in this book, they see the savage murder of one of their classmates who just happens to be a fortune teller as well, at the hands of the daughter of the head teacher. And because of the sort of person Veaer is, they want answers to this, and you get a theming here of not so much forbidden love, but certainly dangerous love, as Veaer does have a thing for this character already set before this, and trying to unravel what's really going on. And this takes you down a bit of a rabbit hole of spirituality, cult-like organizations, and familial bloodlines. It is a really interesting setup for an academia story, and it does a good job of building a level of suspense even. Let's try the English language today. And as well, confusion, because we do have a situation here where we have a main character's point of view that does not have most of or any of the answers, and a number of those answers that they have are probably not remotely accurate. So this is a really good premise for the story that this is telling. So you have a decent cast of characters here, with Veaer being the point of view character. And Veaer is a bit of an outcast within the school. So Veaer is a Kami heritage, which I will get onto in world building in a bit. So they are magically enchanted whilst in the school to not look like they do outside. So there is a level of racism, I would say, there being levelled at this character. They also carry a bloodline within them as well. And Veaer is a very interesting character in the way that they're presented, because as you peel back more and more layers, this feels like a character who has not dealt with their own internal trauma, especially from the death of their friend Kit Thrawn before the events of the book. And that does colour a lot of the interactions in here when you take a step away and start to think about it. Veaer is a very problem-orientated character. They see everything as a puzzle to solve, and the solving of the puzzle is the key approach to how they deal with everything within the story. This does make them slightly socially awkward, and they do have a situation where they are very much the lower class of student. They are here on a scholarship as well, rather than a fully paid up student, which is something else worth bearing in mind. But the unique way that she thinks her way through problems and solves things is very much the driving force of her character throughout, added to the fact of pushing boundaries as well as just a thirst for knowledge. And as I said, Veaer is the point of view character. Now, there are a number of other characters in here. The two major ones I'm going to mention are Elise and Iseult Excava, who are both the children of the head teacher. Elise is the murderess from very early on, but there is a lot of backstory there. And whereas Veaer is a Kami, Elise is a Sentai, which is something different. And the magic has a different sort of basis. And unlike her brother Iseult, she feels a bit like the black sheep of the family. Not stupid by any stretch of the imagination, but whereas Iseult is very much the golden child, Elise is kind of the black sheep of the family. And there is a deep-rooted romanticization of Veaer for Elise by Veaer, I should say. And that is the love interest in here. Very much you have a forbidden love aspects going on there, as well as something else, I think, how I would read it. Izzet was originally going to be the focus of the story for the romance, and that switched during the writing, which I actually find quite interesting. He's not in this a great deal, but he's very much the golden boy looming shadow over Elise in particular and the story as a whole. Now, there are a number of other major characters, Tychon being the primary one who dies early on, who's the fortune teller that very much sets the events in motion for the story. You have the twins of Adir and Hyryn. Adir in particular is kind of more important for Veaer's story as they are on and off physical lovers. And then you also have the mention of Kit Thrawn, who dies before the book, and also Hark Karash. And the second names do matter here because bloodlines is a thing that runs all the way through. Elise and Veaer get the most kind of building for this. Elise's building very much feels like she's trying to prove a point in a way or regain something that was lost and transform who she is. And transformation is another thing that does run through this book all the way through. Veaer, I really do think, is a character that is facing trauma and stilts her worldview. And I may be misreading this, but because of events before the book, it feels like her character really does not have a full grasp on the reality of the situation and some of the people around her. And that makes the narrative at times quite confusing. And I think that's a deliberate choice because she is very much the definition of an unreliable narrator. English is really not easy for me today. Certainly a very interesting character, though. But we're going to jump from characters into world building, and this is where we start to hit a bit of a bump. The world building for this is what kind of threw me, because as the character of Veaer as the point of view, we should have a sense of the world that this is set in, and we don't really get any of that explanation. You get a sense that this is a fully fleshed out world with a lot of history, a lot of law, a lot of religious connotations as well. And that does play into the main story, but we never really get any explanation of what's going on until quite late on in the book in some cases. So things like Veaer being a Chemi and Elise being a Sentai, I don't know what that means. And that, in a way, does kind of spoil the story a little bit. You also have the stuff around bloodlines. You don't realise how important that is until later on. Now, that is explained away, but it can leave you a little bit lost. You get a sense that this is a normal school, but also people have magic, and you don't really see how that interplays. And overall, whilst this does feel like a world that exists and is well built, you don't know anything about it, so it constantly leaves you with a feeling of being lost, which is a massive shame. This is the second book by the author, and I believe their first book, which is called Tell Me How It Ends, is set within the same world, and I am going to go back and read that because I'm wondering if that will give me more context for some of the stuff that happens here. There are clear magical events that have happened in the path involving the 5 angels, who were heroes from a past age. You've got magical wars around the school that alter and protect and change magic and prevent certain magics working. So there's clearly a lot of stuff going on in terms of prejudice, history, religion, so on and so forth. But because it's not explained clearly here, and our character understands the world and clearly knows it, it does mean you end up feeling rather lost and disorientated throughout the book. And that is kind of exacerbated by the presentation. So for the presentation, I'm actually going to be referring to a few bits in the book specifically, because this is, in terms of visual presentation, really, really strong. Written presentation, I'm not sure if this is genius or madness. It really does walk that fine line. So first off, the cover art is absolutely stunning and is the primary reason why I picked up this book. The cover art is by Caleb Hasala. And it's just absolutely stunning. But there's artwork throughout the book as well. So they've given thanks to Hapon for the artistic work when bringing characters to life. There is a lot to like in here. I mean, starting with the artwork on the book itself, which you can see is absolutely stunning. But there's little moments inside. So you have like the map of the school grounds, which is well drawn and Really, really well done, giving you the idea of where the key events are taking place. And that actually really does help offset some of the disorientation that you get from not knowing a huge amount about the world itself. You also have, and I'm not sure how well this is going to come out on camera, but in the actual pages, you can actually see at the start of the chapters, you have the various different images of a butterfly, and this does change throughout the book as well. So it's just absolutely stunning. And as you can see there as well, you also have, oh no, this side. I don't know how left and right works on a camera. You do have puzzles in this book, which sort of builds into Veaer's role, and it shows what these look like as they're being written down and how they figure out these puzzles. And whilst these are not necessarily complex puzzles in themselves, they're complex enough that adding this visual aid as they decode these clues is really, really well done as well. In terms of pacing, this is solidly paced with clear parts and split ups in here. That's really done. But where this kind of falls apart for me, falls apart's unfair. This, I mentioned that the presentation of this feels like it's walking a fine line between genius and madness. And I say that because this book on more than one occasion made me feel lost. Now, a big chunk of that is because of the world building and the fact that we're reading from a point of view character that knows the world, but we don't, and we don't get an explanation for a great deal of the stuff that's going on. So it's hard to really step into the character's point of view in some regards because of that. Also, some of the sequences in here are like a proper acid trip and are really disorientating. And this book has a habit of, at certain times, when I hit certain points and I feel like I've got a grip on what's going on, it's like I'm thrown into a tumble dryer and it's turned on, and I come out feeling just dizzy and confused. And I have to put the book down a few times just to go, what the hell just happened? Because my brain couldn't quite figure out what was going on. And I think that's actually good character writing, but it makes it difficult to read because of something that happens to Veaer before the start of the story. And as we find out the actual details behind that later on, which it appears that Veaer themselves has repressed that memory. Veaer, as a unreliable narrator, wouldn't feel particularly orientated in some of the things that are going on because their coping mechanisms that they've developed wouldn't work. So it does a great job of giving that sense of overwhelmment that I suspect Veaer feels within this because of some inbuilt trauma from previous events. And if that is the intention, that is brilliant, but it's not easy to read. And Dark Academia, at the best of times, can be a little bit dense. And the other thing with this is I've seen the word dense, verbose, to describe the writing style, and I think that's fair. At times, this just feels almost overly wordy. And I say almost because I did quite like this. But it's not an easy read. And I don't think I've read a book, certainly in the last 12 months, that has left me feeling quite so lost as this one did. More than almost any other book that I've read since I started the channel, this one's leaving me really, really torn. Because I do quite like it. I don't like it as much as I want to, though. It has some interesting characters, the story is interesting as well, and the various themes are explored in an interesting manner. But the flawed narrative from the point of view of Veaer can leave you feeling disorientated, especially when you consider the fact you don't get any real anchor points into a lot of the world building that you kind of should already know, or it feels like you should already know at least. And that can make it quite difficult to follow at times. The writing style as well is not for everyone. Now, this is true in general of Dark Academia. It is not a genre that is necessarily the most easy to approach at times. And because of that, I can see this being a real Marmite book. And looking at the reviews, it feels like it may be. I think it's worth sticking with. I think it does a really good job of dealing with the themes once you can sort them out in your own head. It's the getting to that point that becomes a bit of a challenge. I know certainly some of the people I speak to in my friend's Discord, this is not a book I would recommend to them. If you're after a book that's got really interesting theming around theological grounds as well as self-transformation, hatred, and attraction as well, I think this could be really interesting. I gave this 3 stars out of 5 simply because I really do think a lot of people will not get past the 3rd point of this book. But that's my thoughts on Chrysalis and Requiem by Quinton Lee. I'd love to know what your thoughts are if you've read this, or if you've got any recommendations of books that might be similar to this as well. Let me know in the comments below. I will speak to you all soon.